Southampton and their recent reputation has vigorously surrounded their recent Premier League failure. Taken in and then spat right out, but this time could be different. Will still constitutes an exciting new era on the south coast. A steady start to life in the second division showcased glimpses of this. So let's analyse tactically what we've seen so far. The Saints at the time of recording have kicked off the season with 2 wins and 1 draw in all competitions. A last gasp dagger to the popular Wrexham AFC, a win in the Cup and a draw away at promotion rivals. There's certainly a lot to still come. What we've gathered so far from Southampton as an outfit is that Will Still has adopted a mixed, aggressive, front-footed style of play as expected, blending direct moves with ones more delicate. When we take in Will Still's past sides over in France, statistically his teams were very aggressive, defensively accomplished and outstanding, very cross-heavy, foul-heavy, which is loosely translated across to the very small sample size over at Southampton too. This is very early doors, but the Saints, as I've summarised, have been very crossing focused, creating lots of chances, sharing lots of the ball as expected, and then also being very aggressive with the fouls per 90. But the defensive solidity has unfortunately not quite commenced off the ground as of yet, but this is early doors. We're 2 games in to the championship season, and Will Still's record amongst his team so far suggests that this is going to improve. So within the championship so far, we've seen 2 lineups from Will Still. This is the one against Ipswich Town. Hardwood Bell is back in, Fraser as the right wing back, Fernandez in and around here. And then if we look at the first game against Wrexham, it was Jogava there, Ronnie Edwards there. It was a little bit different. But what we've seen so far from Will Still is impressive tactical flexibility. He doesn't particularly want to play this 3-4-2-1. He's more than capable of playing it. He did a lot in France and he's completely fine with it. I suspect if Southampton do get promoted, he will. But I think with the lack of wingers within Southampton's team, as he's previously said in his conference, he can't really play a 4 at the back. They don't have Tyler Dibbling, a proper out-and-out winger that they can play, and they also don't have the depth there either. They have sort of half wingers like Adam Armstrong, who isn't really a number 9 as well. So for me personally, as a Leicester fan, I am quite jealous of Will Still and his flexible approach play, as it seems that with Will Still, what we've seen so far is that it doesn't matter about a style. He is ultimately there to win. It doesn't matter how you do it or how it looks or what shape you're in or what the fullbacks do. You just need to win, and that is a fundamental that seems to be lost on a lot of managers. But if we have a look at Southampton playing out from the back, then this is quite a balanced shape, and it's something that we've seen quite a lot, because as we know, they are very possessionally dominant. They're going to be. Southampton are probably the most superior team within the league. But within this shape when playing out from the back, I think you've got some good technical ability there. You've ultimately got a squad that is very, very used to Russell Martin. There's a lot of ball playing experts within this. 2 very technical midfielders, some decent technical ability within the back line, and then also outlets, somebody to pass forward to in terms of their feet. Maybe not so much the number 9, you could do with someone a little bit more physical here as a bit more of a target, but there's still a lot to work with here. Players dropping deep, players move, players make runs. Ultimately, there's a lot of movement within this phase. They're not just falling still. And I think what we've seen so far is slight tactical adaptability. Again, is that with Brighton in pre-season, it was a 3-1 shape with one of the midfielders slightly pushing up. It was a little bit different. So Will Still is probably a manager who looks at how the opposition presses and then looks, well, how can I change this? How can I get the best passing options and progress the ball as easy as I can? When the ball is passed short, it's ultimately recycled to the centre-backs and then looked out wide or within the forward line and then the midfield. And then when it's played long, it is mainly from the centre-backs into the feet of Robinson and Mateus Fernandez. But if we move up a little bit, I think this was interesting against Ipswich and it was slightly different against Wrexham. Bazunu, you can stay back there. But what we've seen with the midfield is that Shea Charles moved a little bit within these spaces. Downs sort of sat, and then you had Fernandez, Charles and Downs within the midfield. Probably the best midfield three within the Championship. It is absolutely fantastic, and keeping Matheus Fernandes within the Championship is just unbelievable. But what you see is the wing-backs really pushing high, being quite aggressive, and Wellington really getting within these spaces, whilst Robinson can flirt between the half spaces but also moving out wide. It was quite common when the ball was with Kouachi over here that Robinson would drop in as Wellington sort of holds width, as Robinson does have the technical ability to bring the ball forwards himself, just like Tyler Dibbling to a slight. But there was good balance here, and I think this midfield three is something that you really want to get the best out of, because there's technical ability, there's forward passing, there's also match winning ability and creative ability. And Shea Charles, last time we saw him for Southampton, he was a little bit shaky. He needed some development. So that season at Sheffield Wednesday really improved him, because this midfield core, honestly, I think wins you the Championship alone. If Southampton get going this season, if Southampton stay consistent this season, don't lose any of their key players, this midfield is just ridiculous. But without Fernandes, what we've seen against Wrexham was Sugawara within these spaces, and Fraser was sort of flirting in and out again of these areas, and it was just that consistent midfield pivot. But with that pivot, they spread very far wide. Ultimately, there was just connecting the play from one side to the other. Downs, Hardwood-Bellis, it wasn't Hardwood-Bellis against Wrexham, it was Ronnie Edwards, but it would ultimately create these overloads where you could sort of tip so many players towards one side of the pitch. And the wide centre-backs were very aggressive against Wrexham, because Wrexham were pinned in, they were sitting back, and they were very comfortable at that. So the wide centre-backs would allow Southampton to really camp in the opposition's half, really pushing forward and really pushing the opponents back, creating chances. So this overall as a shape within the middle third and the attacking third is so well balanced. It is very good. I think you do need a striker, because Armstrong's better within these spaces, sort of running inside, and maybe if Downs gets a little bit more experience, I know he's very raw, he could be a very good asset here. But this is all good and well. This is very nice. But how does Southampton actually attack? How do they go and win games and beat teams and simply put them to bed? Southampton we've seen attack in different ways so far under Will Still. There's some very key themes and then some different, more improvisational methods. Once in build-up, whichever wing-back is closer to the ball to receive from the centre-backs, he'll drop back, whilst the other looks to push up. As plays occurring towards one flank, the opposition tip towards that side, leaving the opposing flank isolated. This ensures that once Southampton progress the ball into the final third, the passing option is quite apparent, commonly creating 2v1s with the inside forward pulling away the fullback in order to create space for the fellow wide man. This can also be seen on crosses too, with the wingback pushing up into the opponent's box. The opponents will likely choose not to man mark that man. The winger isn't going to follow him all the way, as he'll be focused on the wide centre-back instead, showing how Will Still maximises width and how to stretch and disorganise an opponent's back line. With that continued width and overload out wide, it isn't uncommon for one from the midfield to move forwards at times when looking to play little passing triangles towards one flank, effectively creating quick passing combos and ensuring the Saints and their shape doesn't fall still. It is important to move. Further back in the idea that Charles and Downs share very important roles within accessing each flank and the central spaces too. We've also seen the Saints attack with wide runners from the inside of the attack, the likes of Robinson roaming out wide in order to create more space, quick counter-attacks, set pieces. But perhaps the biggest emphasis we've seen in Southampton attacking play is crosses, sheer box overloads. Numerical emphasis on crosses is a huge theme for Will Still. The goal against Ipswich illustrates this with 4 Southampton shirts in the box, one being Hardwood-Bellis, the right centre-back, making a spontaneous run into the box, one noticeably attacking the near post, far post, then 2 right within the middle. Against Wrexham, this was clear as day, as you'd expect, with Southampton chasing the game. The 2 to 3 numbers on the edge of the box were ready to pounce upon the clearance. Here is Charles and Fernandes, which again continues to be a common theme as the Saints aim to effectively counter-press and maintain the ball should the attack break down, reinstating the importance of off-the-ball qualities and that overall sharpness in the counter-press. When we have a look at Southampton off the ball, it is a very high, aggressive, sort of man-to-man like press. But the key word here is aggressive, and probably the most aggressive part of it is within the centre-backs. At RC Lens, Will still probably had, I think he had the most fouls in the league, and most of those fouls came down to the centre-backs, because the centre-backs, whenever these players would get the ball, bang, they're straight in, they're aggressive. They ultimately look to win back the play as soon as possible, whilst their team is still high, because there's a lot to exploit. They're very pushed back, the distances are quite big, and it does work very well when it's well executed. But so far as Southampton, I don't think it's worked as well as Will still would like, simply because we've seen 3.5 XG conceded, which is, I think, the 4th worst within the league, I said earlier. That's crazy for a team of Southampton's quality. But it hasn't quite worked because of the timing of the jumps. Now, there's some key culprits for this. Quarashi, he's very young, he's very raw. I think sometimes he relies on his very long legs and sheer speed sometimes to recover with his mistakes. But Stevens sometimes lacks that aggressiveness. Hardwood Bellis, not quite fit yet, but I imagine he'll do well here. And it's just moments where they don't quite get the jumps right. Manchester United really struggled with it last season. A through at the back system can be very difficult to master. Oliver Glasner's done it very well, but it is something that can be quite difficult, especially at championship level when the expectations poured on you. So they often find these runners into the channel, and obviously the two up top against Wrexham, Kiefer Moore and Josh Windass caused havoc for this back line. But what it aims to do is to be very high and energetic, pushing onto the keeper, pushing onto the centre-backs, really clashing, winning the ball back high, because although a lot of teams in the Championship will go long, a lot of teams still play out from the back, and it is something that Southampton will face next season should they move into the Premier League. So it's important that they're ready and they've got a good idea and a very adaptable idea of how to approach this. I think this aggressiveness has been shown so far within the Championship, as Southampton have the most fouls within the league. But probably the most interesting thing about it is that they only have 4 yellow cards. I think that's the 5th joint most amongst about 10 teams, because so many teams have 4 yellow cards, 3 yellow cards, 5, 6, 7, whatever. But what's interesting about that is that it suggests that Southampton have had slightly more tactical fouls than purely just bulldozing into an opponent, purely just running into the back of an attacker, which is very interesting because it suggests that Will still is going to lean into the dark arts of football. Fouls within these spaces here slightly kill momentum, and it kills any progression that the opposition can make, especially if it's here. It's so slow in terms of the progression, and it allows Southampton to keep the ball in this half and not this one. However, once we move into the middle third, Southampton do move more into a 5-4-1 shape. This is something we've seen against Ipswich. You have the pivot, Downs and Charles, and then you have Robinson tucking back here, and it ultimately looks to trigger the press once the ball is flowing back within these spaces just here. It's just a simple shape of the ball. It's something that Crystal Palace can do, and if you want to trigger the press, it's very easy to turn into a 5-2-3 with Fernandes and Robinson to leave that space, and that space can be occupied by the wing backs should you want to be even more aggressive. But for me personally, I think Southampton have been very promising so far. With a new group, with a new manager who has a slight inexperience at this level, it is going to take time, especially with an elaborate system such as this one, and that's okay. It's going to take time and they're going to improve. When you have a look at the champions of the Championship the past few seasons, Leicester, they had a very good winning start under Enzo Maresca, but they were conceding a high volume of shots. That first game against Coventry could have won that game quite easily. If you have a look at Leeds last season, they had a lot of rough patches under Daniel Farke. If you have a look at Fulham a few years ago, all these Championship sides have rough patches of uncertainty, and whether or not the manager really knows what he's doing and how to get the best out of the squad. So I think it is important that you give Will still time, but what I think is also important is that Southampton recognise the opportunity that's ahead. I think Southampton and the Championship is there for the taking. When you have a look at the other relegated teams, Ipswich have been okay so far. Leicester, possible points deduction, very inconsistent, losing Bilal El-Chanous, Abdul Fattah was left away. You've got other teams up there as well, such as your Coventry's, but nobody has the quality that Southampton have. So this league is truly there for the taking for Southampton, and I think they need to recognise that, stamp some more authority and control into games, and really start breezing past teams, because we know they can, we know they have the quality to, and Southampton, under Will Still, have a lot of promise. Under any new manager, there's going to be faults within the system, simply because the players just aren't quite ready yet. Kouachi, very young. Stevens, Hardwood, Bellis is very unsharp at the moment, so it's going to take time, but once it's executed to perfection, we're going to see Will Still at his best. Thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, smash a like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know where you think Southampton will finish come the end of the season. Will it be first? Will it be playoffs? Will it be automatic promotion? Will it be lower than that? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.